I actually wondered this morning, Will, whether you're gonna be wearing your attire today. Your,
Really?
you know, your
'Cause it was cold?
short sleeve shirt and your flip flops.
I was inside all day.
No way, there's no way he's gonna wear that.
30 degrees.
Boom.
Oh, this is, I would wear this even if it was like a light dusting of snow, I would still wear it. Sorry, I missed that meeting.
Oh, the graph?
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Representative, Wilcox is there again, so that always adds,
He's been there every time.
yep,
Yeah,
that's
that's
a big,
nice.
that's a big deal.
Yeah, he's very knowledgeable, insightful also.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
The ranking member for the Republicans, so it's not a chump change.
Sure, this is for last meeting and the meeting before that. We didn't approve the minutes last time. Did he have a lot to do with us getting all of our money that we got? Yeah.
Him and John Braun, who's the Senate budget writer for the Republicans, who's out of Lewis County, Chehalis, was real supportive, so that's has a lot to do with it.
You probably don't need any of this stuff. Do you want the minutes?
Whatever, yeah, whatever. Sure, I'll take it.
She printed off a bunch of stuff
Or
or
you can
flurry.
start that already.
Okay, here are the council minutes for the last council meeting. In lieu of our, I don't know, I guess in lieu of our council update from John, who's in Cincinnati. Cincinnati. Okay.
So before you gavel us in, we talked about, I guess we could do it one of a couple different ways. We talked about having the training session. You could gavel us in, then we could do the training, and then we could go to the business. Or we could just go straight into training without gaveling us in, and then you could call the meeting to order after it, but I don't.
We don't have any business, so
Right.
we may as well get an Uber with me.
Yeah, you can do it however you want.
I think we should just go through the jibber jabber portion of the meeting and then move on to the training for at least
Portion of the meeting.
for at least this part.
The second
The second
series
series of jibber jabbers. Alright. Call to order the Wednesday, October 9th, 2019 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. Join me for the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have this agenda to approve for tonight, and we also have the minutes from our last meeting on September 18th and the meeting before that on August 21st. So take a look at those materials. Give me a motion.
I move to approve the agenda for the October 9th meeting as presented.
Okay.
Aye.
Nice. Shoot.
I'll move to approve the Wednesday, September 18th, 2019 minutes as written.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
I have a question about that one.
Okay.
So,
Oh, a change?
well, I guess a clarifying question maybe.
Sure.
How it says that Shelley Forrest is absent, then in the next paragraph talking about her removal September 10th, and then saying that she's not absent because she's no longer commissioner. Is that reflected like it should be, or?
Let's, how about, can you redo your motion and make a motion to approve it with the change that we strike Shelley Forrest from the,
Yeah, I'll move to approve the Wednesday, September 18th, 2019 Planning Commission minutes with the change of striking Commissioner Shelley Forrest from the absent role because of the explanation that follows in the paragraph. Yeah.
I'll second that.
nice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And I'll move to approve the minutes from the August 21st meeting as presented.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nice one. Moving on, John is in Cincinnati, doing some kind of training. It's probably boring. So there won't be a council report, but I did provide the minutes of the council meeting that I can just read at your, some future point, future date. No public hearing, no unfinished business, and on that note, let's move into our training.
All right. As you recall from the September meeting, I asked you to take a look at the table of contents for the short course resource manual on planning in Washington State, and we identified a number of sections that we were gonna kind of do an ad hoc training on. And so this is my version of the Growth Management Act, the chapter 3, A through F. And then in November, next month, we're gonna spend all of our time on local project review. So this is all framework stuff, kind of background, a little bit of legislative history, and then comp plan stuff. I might suggest that for the duration of these trainings, maybe bring your comp plan. It'll help kind of ground our conversation and you can refer to it. I see maybe a couple comp plans. Is that one? Have you got one?
I don't think Corey was here when we gave it.
Oh, maybe
Maybe when
John.
I have a comp plan at home, but I didn't,
Right.
I was out of my time, so no, that
Yeah,
was.
so no big deal. I did print out a couple excerpts
Okay.
from the plan.
Let's see.
So I'll give credit where credit is due. I did do like some extracting from that MRSC guide that I was referencing just a moment ago. So this isn't these aren't my own ideas really. I just kind of pulled stuff in that I thought was kind of a good way to introduce this. And there's 4 pages. So I titled it Crash Course Introduction to GMA. Hopefully we don't crash. So I'll pass that out. Then I also have a copy of like a 11x17 of the zoning map. I don't know if the city has printed these out or not, but you can have these. If you look through your comp plan, you should have a copy of the land use map in the document. And then I have a couple other little, dare I say, fun things to pass out as we go. So, since this is the first time we're doing this, if you want to do it a different way, let me know. This isn't for me, this is for you guys. So what I did is I kind of summarized on the crash course introduction to GMA the contents that are in this section, and I think I might continue to do that just so you can refer back to them. So I kind of go through some context and then I double back on a few things. So I'll start out and maybe outline each section, and then we can chat about it, and then we'll go to the next section. Does that sound good? Like a decent first shot at this? Washington enacted the GMA in a special legislative session on April 1st, 1990. I don't know if that was the best day to adopt a far-reaching land use plan, but April Fool's Day was the day they chose. And the primary intent, and this is kind of a looking back at it now, but basically what they did is they had, the state had been through a bunch of boom and bust cycles that you might expect. It was starting to slowly transition away from the natural resources base that was kind of mid-20th century focus, like timber and fisheries and stuff like that, and starting to urbanize. And Oregon had done some similar growth management things as well. And so Oregon's, I believe Oregon's was like a 86 or something like that, but Oregon was first with growth management. So Washington's legislature said, hey, we kind of like that, but we want to focus new growth and development in designated urban growth areas, keep rural areas rural, make sure that critical infrastructure was keeping pace with development, protect resource lands and the environment, and respect regional differences and provide cities and counties a variety of ways to accomplish the four goals above. So they built this structure that we now plan under. And they expressed 14 different goals in that legislative document. And that's what those bullets are here. They talked about urban growth. They talked about encouraging it where there's facilities adequate to meet the service needs, reducing sprawl. Does everyone kind of know what sprawl is? Okay, that's low density development that's out on the fringes that, don't necessarily have enough density to provide, it's not super cost effective, it's kind of wasteful of resources, etc. They talked about transportation, encouraging efficient multimodal transportation. Multimodal means lots of different types of it. So multimodal is cars and buses and bikes and peds. Those would be four different modes. Housing, a variety of affordable housing, economic development consistent with resources and facilities throughout the state, protect property rights from arbitrary decisions and discriminatory actions, issue permits in a timely manner, natural resource industries, maintain those, encourage retention of open space, protect the environment again, encourage citizen involvement in the planning process, ensure that facilities are provided in a timely and affordable manner, talk about historic preservation, and touch on shoreline management. Now the interesting thing was that there already was an environmental provision in the State Environmental Policy Act that had been, I think, on the books since like '79. So there already was environmental limitations, and some cities already had forms of community vision plans and how we want to grow, and certainly they already had zoning. The the state had, pretty good record on zoning, but some of that stuff was all hodgepodge, it definitely didn't interact right. So they built this in 1990. They built this GMA package and kind of laid it out for the cities. And in 1991, they kind of made a few amendments to that, and they created what's called the Growth Management Hearings Board. Did they talk about that at the training at all? Did they talk about the Growth Management Hearing Board? Do you remember?
I don't remember that from my training.
Okay, so the Growth Management Hearing Board is a quasi-judicial review panel that considers challenges to county and city plans and regulations. And it's, the members of those panels are appointed by the governor. And there are three. There's a Western Washington, there's an Eastern Washington, and there's a Central Puget Sound region. And so they are kind of not judges. They're mostly lay people. Mostly they're attorneys, but they're not there in that. They're there as land use experts, and they are making sure that cities are following what the GMA has established.
Is that only when somebody is trying to sue the city, or just
Yeah, when you're
in general oversight?
when you're appealing, and I say it down there at that last paragraph at the bottom of page 1, appeals of development decisions or denials made pursuant to GMA plans and regulations would continue to be made in Superior Court. So you'd still send that stuff through that, but if there's a challenge to the plan, if they say, look, your plan itself, which is a legislative action because it's adopted by, you guys make a recommendation and then the county or the city council makes the adoption, but that's a legislative decision. It's not a project-based decision. It covers the whole city, and the courts give a lot of leeway to elected officials for legislative reasons. It's the same thing as like the Supreme Court trying to interpret what the Congress says. They give a lot of leeway to what the elected representatives say, and they try not to write law. So same thing with the growth board, is that they are considering challenges to the comprehensiveness or the consistency of the comp plan, and not necessarily a development decision where you guys have denied my garage expansion. Like, that's still going to go to Superior Court. That's not a legislative issue. It's going to go to the Growth Management Hearings Board. But so they set up this kind of extra level of review because the whole, did they talk about GMA being a bottom-up approach at all? Did they touch on history at all at their course? They talk about growth management being, in this state took a very purposeful, the legislature decided that they didn't want the state of Washington to dictate to Tenino or Coda or Washtenaw how to do zoning. That wasn't what they wanted to do, so they wanted to leave those decisions at a local level. That's different than what Oregon does. Oregon has a much more top-down, like a regional approach. So in Oregon, they have regional kind of councils of governments, and those groups say, okay, here's the line. Here's where it's going to be urban, here's where it's going to be rural, and so it's more of a top-down approach. GMA's 20, almost 30 years old, right? There are lots of people who argue it's not bottom-up anymore. So, I think the intent was to have the local jurisdictions figure this out, and as long as things were consistent at the county level, within all the cities in the county, kind of like it was one of those. But that's not, I don't think people would argue that too much anymore. I think they'd start to argue that it's much more top-down now, and there's a lot of push, especially from state agencies, to do things a certain way in order to be compliant with GMA, and that kind of changes the balance of power a little bit. So we won't get into balance of power. We'll talk a little bit about consistency and how I guess that last paragraph says they also added in this, at the top of page 2, they added some kind of penalties, because prior to that a lot of this stuff was a little more voluntary, and so it took a year or so for them to say, oh, that may not work very well, so then they instituted a couple penalties, and most of the penalties are financial. So they, basically the state starts to just withhold money from you if you're purposely violating GMA. It's not very common, it's happened a few times, and mostly in places like Chelan County, which is where Wenatchee's at, and the city of Chelan. And basically the commissioners there, flipped the governor the bird and said, we're not doing it, right? And the governor said, well, you're not getting any money then. So they lost all their transportation funding, they weren't eligible for WashDOT projects, they weren't eligible for grants, and so they were found in non-compliance. And then that opened them up to a lot of other types of lawsuits from people. So even though they were, they failed to comply with the requirements of the act, and they had financial penalties from the state, it was worse than that, because they couldn't issue certain types of permits and other things like that. Any permit process that had to go through the state's like, we're not doing that until you guys, because you got a building moratorium because you're out of compliance with GMA. So that's where you start to see that shift to start coming back the other way. It's like,
Sure.
You say it's bottom up, but when push comes to shove, Dad's got the car keys.
As long as you know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And how recent was that?
The Chelan County thing, I wanna say like 2000, maybe 99. Kittitas County got in big trouble too. They, big trouble's not the right way to put it. They were found not in compliance with GMA. I don't know any other ones just off the top of my head, but I know those two in particular.
So when you say it's more top-down now, that's because even though we still have the power to make recommendations in the city council, but really at the end of the day, the higher-ups are the ones that control a lot of the funds that we need.
Yeah,
How
go
do
ahead.
they affect, we're still making zoning decisions and decisions about our urban growth area, and what, other than them forcing a structure on it, by having to do the comp plan and be in compliance, in what way has it moved more top down, I guess?
Because it's like one of those, you live in my house, you live by my rules.
Sure.
I'm not making you live here in my house. You could move out and live in the.
So I guess that started when they started imposing the fines, basically,
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah, when they decided to start withholding, funds and revenue, that's when, people are like, fine, if you're not gonna pay to feed me and buy me clothes anymore, I'm gonna go ahead and start following your rules. And I think that there are, I skipped over it because it doesn't pertain to Thurston County and Tenino, but not every county in the state has to plan under GMA. Did they talk about that in the plan? Gosh, bless it. There's 39 counties in the state, I think 35 are GMA, have to plan under GMA. The other 4, and like Skamania County is a good example. Adams County, I wanna say, is also not GMA. Cowlitz County is not GMA, so they haven't grown fast enough to justify being subject to this stuff. Now, they have to still plan for critical areas. They still have to make sure they don't dump pollutants in the water and bulldoze wetlands and stuff like that. They have to comply with all that stuff, but they don't have to do mandatory planning with all the elements that a comp plan has up here.
That's sounding familiar now that you're saying it like that.
Yeah, there are some that chose to be, they volunteered to be, like Stevens County in northeast Washington, which is like up by the Idaho Panhandle. They decided to be, and now they're trying to opt out.
Oh, they decided to be a Growth Management Act county, and now they're saying,
They want out.
we don't wanna do it, we're too small, we're not a threat.
Right. Because, yeah, I don't know about the last part, but I mean, because we do planning across the state, and planning in Washtenaw has the exact same rules as the planning in Seattle. There's no if you're this type of city, you get to follow these series of rules. If you're this size of city, you get to follow these series of rules. It's the same. And so what that does is it puts a really heavy burden on really small towns and counties. I don't know off the top of my head how big Stevens County is, but I guess it's like 30,000 probably. you know. So they have all the same county requirements as Spokane County, which is 300,000,
Whereas King County.
whereas King County, which is like, 4 million or, 3 million, whatever.
Okay.
Without all the resources.
Right. So for like those counties that were found to be out of compliance, do you think that was an intention? I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is like how likely is it for them to come to a place and say you're out of compliance? I mean, do you have to really work at it, or do you have to really be trying to do something completely opposite of what they want you to be doing?
Yeah, I think mostly most of the agencies want you to be in compliance with GMA, and so they'll do like, hey, that may not be in compliance with GMA, you may wanna change that, the whole like, passive aggressive thing that the state agencies do.
Okay.
And so they'll kind of tell you, we don't think that matches up with the code. And then at some point, they'll take a complaint to, or, whatever they call it procedurally, to the governor that says, look, Chelan County's, we told them 4 times, they're clearly going over here, we set the standard 7 and they're doing, 92, or whatever, they're way off the straight and narrow, so, I think it has to be really blatant.
Sure.
That doesn't mean you're not opened up, so that's the state side, but there's a ton of other liability and mostly civil liability stuff where someone's trying to do something development-wise, and then they can sue till the cows come home at Superior Court and ratchet it all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can find that you're, purposely violating, Clean Water Act, fish, whatever, whatever you wanna say for that specific issue, in the hypothetical. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
How do cities in Adams County, I think you said they were one of the non-GMA counties, how do they deal with their comp plan or expanding their boundaries or whatever, the various things that, sort of require?
They are, they don't have to have a comprehensive plan, and they don't have to do a buildable lands analysis or a land capacity analysis to change the borders within their, for urban and rural lands. And really the way it is there is it's, in those situations, it's cities and everything else, right? So the cities in Adams County is like, Ritzville, right? That's a great example. So Ritzville is a city, it's incorporated, it's got a zoning map, they have their own comp plan, right? But they don't have to have, maybe they don't wanna have a utilities element, so they don't, right?
No industrial areas, if they didn't want to.
If they don't want to, they don't have to, and, maybe they wanna have zoning inside their city that's half-acre lots. Cause the way GMA and case law is set up is that, an urban density is 4 units or more. It's not a bright line, that's kind of the language, the parlance that they use for that, there's no bright line, for what's considered urban and what's considered rural, but generally it's thought to be, and there's citations in case law about 4 lots an acre. Once you hit 4 lots an acre, quarter-acre lots, that starts to be able to be more considered urban densities. You can have larger lots in cities under certain circumstances, we'll get to that next month, but it's generally where there's critical areas. So like if your parcel has got floodplain, like the Scatter Creek over here, if you had a parcel over there, you'll probably get away with an acre lot or 2-acre lot because the rest of it's all underwater, right? Or if you're on a shoreline and 2/3 of your property's tidal, right, and it's unbuildable, well, they're not gonna say you gotta subdivide that out there, or it's not urban. So there are ways you can have larger lots, but generally speaking, development is 4 or more. So comp plan elements are, I like to think of them in the 3 Cs. I think that came out of grad school, because I couldn't actually find it in GMA when I looked today. But comprehensive, consistent, and concurrent. So I kind of start with that, and then later on, I think on page 3, I identify that, I guess we didn't get page numbers on all the pages, but you'll know, page 3 is not the back page, and not the page behind page 1. I come back to that, so just just bear with me, let me just kind of plant that seed, we'll come back to what comprehensive, consistent, concurrent mean. So there are now 7 elements for comp plans. The rural one is for counties, and so cities don't have to do a rural element. In fact, they shouldn't be doing a rural element, right? Because they shouldn't have any rural land inside their city boundaries, because that's part, again, back to the goals of this thing is rural for rural and urban for urban. Land use, transportation, capital facilities, housing, utilities, and economic development, which was added in 2017 with a fun little asterisk that said, if the state authorizes funding for economic development planning. Well, the state didn't authorize it, but everybody plans for it anyway. It was already an optional element in comp plans, and you can imagine cities, that's an easy thing for city councils to put in the plan, because it's positive, it's business related, it's, talks about growth, it talks about vitality. So, everybody already had it, almost everybody already had it. Anyway. And, GMA says you have to protect critical areas. So most of the time, the critical areas language, the goals of the policies are in that kind of land use section. It's usually where that stuff is found. You can have other elements to your comp plan. I did a comp plan for Kittitas County earlier this year that had a natural resources chapter. Right, you can have, it's just at a minimum. So you could, I think, does this city have a historic preservation chapter? I can't remember. Some cities have a historic preservation chapter, right? Some could have a town center chapter. These are just minimums that you would have to have. So then I spend the next page or two kind of detailing what these elements are, what's in there. Land use element talks about, what land uses are cool and what the density should be, how to protect resources. Talks about population projections, sometimes the need for public facilities. It just depends. Transportation's a little more prescriptive. It's got some details in there. We're probably gonna jump into each of these in more detail. I'm trying to remember if
Just a quick
we talked
question.
about that. Yeah.
Public facilities are like city hall, fire department. Now, do schools also count as that, or
Yeah.
they do? Okay, yeah. So it's anything that's owned.
By the public. So it could be cell towers, it's water towers, parks. Sometimes bus facilities are included in there, sometimes those are included in transportation element.
Okay.
We can spend, I guess the little outline here doesn't break down each chapter in particular. And I'm not sure, I guess November, we're also doing some SEPA stuff. Let's see about that. So let's just talk about that then. So the transportation chapters have land use assumptions, which are basically how many trips is this land use gonna generate? So you build McDonald's, how many cars are gonna roll through that drive-through and stop and park in the parking lot a day? And what does that impact look like on the city's roads? And then most of the time, the cities through a SEPA process would assess like a mitigation fee. Like, hey, McDonald's, that's, 1,100 cars a day, that's, times a year, that's all this traffic, it's emissions, it's wear and tear on the roads, you owe us $80,000. We're gonna update we're gonna put that in a fund and update the roads down, overlay the roads down.
And that's something that's in the code, that, like,
Yeah, there's,
how much,
there could either be some, like a trip charge, like when I worked for City of Lakewood, it's $35 a trip. So in that example, it'd be like, $35,000.
So do they charge that once, or is that annually? So it's just once, it goes into a fund, and it's hopefully supposed to be managed.
Or just like, hey, the road down the street that you guys are eventually gonna access needs to be updated to accommodate all that volume.
Sure.
Or we're gonna install a traffic signal, or you're gonna install a traffic signal, because when Walmart moved into Lakewood, they dropped like $2 million.
On just improvements?
Yeah, they built like 2 signals at $350 a pop, and a bunch of curb gutter sidewalk, a bunch of overlay for roads.
So that's the same when the developer wants to build a housing complex, and then he has to put in a sidewalk,
Yeah.
or a turn lane.
Yeah, so there, we'll get into that in a couple months, but the code, there are some things that are just, you build it, if you are doing something, you will do this other stuff, irrespective of if it's like one house or 30 houses, right? So if you're doing a short plat and building homes, you have to improve the street frontage. So it doesn't really matter if you're doing 20 houses or 4 houses, you have to improve the center line on your street. But you could also get assessed a trip charge. Some cities have impact fees, which, did they talk about that at all? Did they talk about impact fees? Impact fees are like other, per house or per dwelling unit or per trip. You can get impact fees for schools, for traffic, for fire, for police, just kind of, hey, your growth is causing us to work harder or have to hire people and you need to pay for that, but it's only a one-timer. So like in Olympia, the total impact fees per unit is like 25 grand. So if you wanna know why housing costs are going up, that has a factor that's not disputed. There's when you're paying a $25,000 premium on every single unit that you're building as a developer, you build 100 houses, you owe them, whatever the math is on that, 250. You're gonna figure out a way to make that up.
Sure. Can you charge different impact fees? Like, could you charge one for residential and one for a business, and then not only for a business, but maybe one for a type of a business? Or is it usually just across the board?
Most of the time, businesses aren't assessed an impact fee on the I'm not sure how you do that. I don't know of anybody that's done a business impact fee. What they do is a trip.
Okay.
They'll charge a trip charge. So like, again, back to my McDonald's example, 1,100 trips a day, they'll assess a fee either on an impact fee, or SEPA has a way when you write it up that you can, if your code allows it, that you can charge a trip fee.
Okay.
That's kind of another way to do it. Anyway, so transportation element, that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but that's fine. Talks about, has got all these details in it. Level of service, we can talk about that. We'll probably have to do a section on transportation or level of service, but level of service is like a standard, like, certain delay is acceptable at intersections. If you pull up and stop at a stoplight and you're at the stoplight for 30 seconds until it cycles on, that's pretty much an A, right? If you have to wait through 3 cycles because you're so far back that you only get to go like this, that's probably an F. Like, it's probably failing. It's probably so crowded that, we've all been there before, Interstate, most of the time the interstates are not operating. A is free flow, and F is like seriously degraded. And then there's a bunch of grades in between, so. That'll come back. We'll come back to level of service because that has to do with concurrency. Some of these stuff do too. So inside your transportation element, you have to have all this stuff, all this kind of data that basically shows the state you're paying attention to your roads and your transportation network and are planning appropriately. So that's why they have this, like, third to last bullet, impact analysis on new plans on adjacent communities to assure coordination demand. That's basically saying you're talking to your neighbors, because when people get to your community, they're gonna probably come through another community to get there, right? And so you have to coordinate that stuff and make sure that they have an opportunity to comment on your development as well, because they may say, well, look, this isn't a great example, but if this was another city over here in West Tenino, and they're coming down 99, they may say, well, impacts don't just start all of a sudden when you get into the city. It starts way down the road.
If Yelm blows itself up to outlandish size and everybody has to drive there tonight to get to the freeway if they're going south, then that would be something they should have.
Yeah, potentially. So what they do then is they would, if I was Yelm, I'd hire a transportation firm to figure out exactly where those people are going, and I'd try to prove that they're not coming through your town, or only 4 of them are coming through your town, the other 96 are going other places.
Or somewhere, yeah.
Right, so that's called like an OD study. And so that's what they do, and that's what McDonald's would do too. When Rainier says, well, we want some of that action, right? They're coming through our town to get to your town. And then McDonald's will say, look, our traffic model shows by the time they get there, there's 4 people. So $3, right? You know, so they, you know, it's not very much, so.
So I imagine where that really gets complicated is like down in Southern California, where you literally have a city that stops on a street and another, and big cities that starts,
Yeah.
and they're just in squares, and they're just, so then you're.
The hardest part is when there's a grid network. I mean, we've all been in downtowns where there's multiple ways to get to that destination, you know, and even if it's a little bit roundabout, if we're trying to avoid the bus that's stopped there, or the manhole that's blown, or the construction site, we'll go kind of a roundabout sort of way. A lot of suburbia, a lot of later development happened in such a way that there's an arterial. And that's what you drive, right? So there's really only like a couple ways to get there, so then that makes the model really easy. It's like water flow. So there's a lot of details in there, different codes that are expected, or policy statements. I mean, generally a comp plan, I didn't kind of outline what it was, because you've all seen it before, but it's a policy document, right? And it basically says this is our wishes and dreams, and this is how we feel about certain things, and it has data, and then that data affords you the freedom to make policy statements, you know, goals, and say this is what we strive to look like, or this is what we want to have, or when new development comes to town, this is how we think it should look. And then the implementation of that document, of that policy statement, is in the laws, in the ordinances, in the rules, in the regulations, the rulemaking, if you will. How are we doing on time, all right?
Yep.
So you got capital facilities at the bottom of, what would be page 2. That is places, capital facilities are, like you said, Alex, they're owned by the government, and they are things like big ticket items like police stations, city halls, wastewater treatment plants, physical structures, schools, sometimes community halls, depending on who they're owned by, public utility districts. And then that whole thing is, you include it because one of the key elements to a capital facility plan is something called the 6-year plan, or call it a capital improvement plan. So the capital facilities element, that is like a 20-year look at the things we need, and the 6-year plan is like a 6-year funding approach that most of the time gets rolled into the budget for these guys every year, and they'll just keep moving the projects, you know, so this year's 6-year capital facilities plan and transportation plan, because that has to be in there too, there's a 6-year transportation improvement plan. Where did that show up? I guess that middle bullet about financial resources and funding plan, that's where that would be, but anyway, another way you implement the comp plan is through these infrastructure plans for transportation and for capital improvements, and that's a budget item the council looks at every year. And so this year we said we were gonna spend 200 grand on the city hall, right? We did that, so we'll take that off the list, and now we need to start getting, maybe we need to paint the outside, or we need a new roof, or whatever, and so it's just, stuff just keeps piling up on that.
It's only structures, capital facilities? It's not like the bulldozer or something like that?
It depends. Like a bulldozer would probably be considered a capital asset, yeah.
Like a big ticket, just big ticket
Yeah,
item.
it's like what you consider to be a capital, like capital asset. So, I've seen fire trucks on there for bulldozers.
I think Tenino's has a lot.
Sometimes police cars are on there, you know, I mean, those police cars are, you know, $50,000, $60,000 vehicles, so they'll depreciate them and then figure out how they're gonna buy new ones. But it wouldn't be something like, you know, computers or, you know, other inventory items like that. Plus, it's also supposed to say things like, oh, it looks like we're gonna, you know, need a new fire station because that area of town doesn't have, you know, its response time is pretty bad, right? So we should be looking for a new place to build a fire station. And so that would maybe, they're careful about identifying parcels ahead of time, because if they don't already own it, then someone's like, oh, you're gonna wanna come buy my property for your fire station, and all of a sudden a reluctant seller, so, they don't, if they have the site, they'll kind of say, hey, that's the new site for our fire station for 2025 or whatever. So far, so good?
Yep.
Housing's pretty straightforward, you have to, provide sufficient land for all types of housing. The housing element itself will have, as yours does, like an inventory, and in the Tenino comp plan, it's a map showing when the houses were built and kind of their general condition. I don't know if it shows condition, but it's a colored map. Is that in there, in your version? Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's a pretty decent map. It might be, it's probably in the housing section, but
Oh.
again, the reason for the data is to support the goals and policies. So when someone says, why'd you do that? It's like, well, look at the condition of the housing in this area. So of course, we're gonna have we wanna have a program for housing reinvestment, or we're gonna offer a grant fund for 10 grand, for someone to upgrade their porch or whatever it may be.
Just has assessed value and age.
Yeah. So what that shows from here, you know that low assessed value and old, right? I mean, maybe that's oversimplification, but that's generally, so I bet there's probably a policy in there that says encourage new, adaptive reuse, and encourage upgrades, and encourage a paint a house program, or, replace a broken window, or whatever. But that's probably why that
Doesn't
says it.
seem very accurate anymore.
Yeah, and that's the thing about maps is there's,
What's
Is it
that?
good or the bad?
Well, this seems
It's
like
just the-
really low values, I would say, compared with everything.
so that's the other thing is you, anytime you include a map and then you go to do an update, you have to make a decision about whether, you really wanna do that work again to update it, or whether it was, how valuable it was, but I think those maps are pretty good.
I mean, relatively speaking, it probably hasn't changed much,
Yeah.
I would say.
Any question on housing? All right, utilities, the difference between utilities and capital facilities utilities are mostly like, natural gas, electricity, and telecommunication lines, not necessarily the big substation or the big, treatment facility. It's mostly like the infrastructure that's buried. And again, that's for that same reason, so that you can say, oh, looks like, we're planning on doing a sewer line extension out that way, or we need to do, add to the water capacity out to that neighborhood because they're gonna build a new subdivision and they're not gonna have enough flow for their new build out. And that's in your comp plan too. There's a whole listing of pipe sizes and age of the utility plant and stuff like that. So it's all about providing adequate utility capacity to support growth. And then finally, economic development, that's kind of a catch-all. There's a whole variety of ways that cities get at that element, and it's a decent chapter, and you can use those policies and goals from the economic development element to add weight to grant applications. I mean, I've submitted grant applications that have like 3 pages worth of goals and policies for the comp plan. Like, we're really serious about this, or we're really desperate, or whatever.
So would a really extreme example of an economic development, would that be like Leavenworth? Where at one,
It may be, I would say Leavenworth's plan is really strict on the land use and the housing side. So Leavenworth has I think they have a whole chapter on urban design in their comp plan.
okay, right,
Because.
which follows their vision of.
Right, because they've got, a
The
very
Bavarian-
strict idea of who they are and who they wanna be and how they wanna preserve
Okay.
that. So the economic development element probably, that chapter probably says stuff like retain the Bavarian village feel.
Sure.
And market, to, German tourists or what, you know, so that's where in the economic development element, it's more like a marketing and branding and business strategy approach. The regulatory, there's hardly any regulatory stuff that comes out of that chapter. Most of the regulatory stuff would come out of the other two.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? So
Yeah.
they'd say like happy fun stuff about like encourage the annual tree lighting ceremony by, you know, contributing to nonprofits, you know, so they'd say things like that,
Sure.
you know, to support things they want, but it's usually not regulatory based.
Okay.
Periodic update, so we're off the actual contents of the comp plan and we're into, how we change it. And we'll come back to this in later months, but I did wanna call it out here that GMA requires comp plan updates every 8 years, and it's really kinda every 8 to 10 years because of the way the years overlap sometimes, but we're coming out of, this was your update, your periodic update, so, you know, you're compliant, 2016, things when your plan was adopted, so you're good, and that document considered updated population projections, growth management amendments, so that's like legislation. Hearings board, we talked a little bit about the hearings board, so if the hearings board has made a bunch of decisions over the last, 10 years since you updated your comp plan last, you better make sure your comp plan's consistent with those decisions. And most of the time, communities have gone in the interim and fixed it so that they're not 7 years out of compliance with what the growth management hearings board is, because otherwise somebody will just say, you're not following best available guidance and find you not in compliance, and then you'll get, dinged. So if you can, they try to update it on the fly. Case law and then changes in the community, which comes down to, like a big development came on board that we didn't expect, or a road got shut down, or whatever.
Could that even be a major employer left town?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Either what came to or left town. So then the next section is on population changes, and this is kind of a fundamental part of a lot of what we do, and it has a bearing on both urban growth areas and annexations. So I'm gonna spend a moment here, maybe a little bit more than I would have otherwise, because it's relevant to West Tenino and other parts. So I'm gonna pass out what was supposed to be an 8.5 by 11, but I forgot to reset the printer, so it's a really visually compelling appendix to the comp plan. So this is in the comp plan. It is appendix C, demographics, and so it shows Tenino's population from over the last 100 years. Overall gain of 657, something like that, over 100 years. But rebounded quite a bit, and I think it's at 1750 now. So maybe a smidge higher than that. But the reason I bring this out is because, and then this goes with, and this is the other piece, is population is really a negotiated situation. In general, the Office of Financial Management will say, hey, Thurston County, we think you guys are gonna grow by 200,000 in the next 10 years. Right? And if Thurston County buys that, if they say, okay, we agree with that. And most of the time they do, unless they run their own independent, population analysis, which is expensive and still has to be kind of validated, and the methodology has to be approved by OFM, so it's kind of risky. But Kittitas County, we did that for some of that work for Kittitas County a couple years ago, and OFM's like, actually at the end of the day, our number was like in the middle of the range anyway, so still, what OFM will do is they'll give you a high, medium, and low for your growth rate. So they'll say, Thurston County, we think you're gonna grow anywhere between 150 and 210, right? So you've got this over the next, 10 years, that's gonna be your growth rate. And then the county will accept a growth rate somewhere in there. or they'll argue for something outside of the range, and they'll have to make a case about why they think it's outside the range, like, oh, you guys didn't know this, but Boeing's gonna open up a plant here, or, you know, whatever. We're gonna build Tesla batteries, and that just was announced, and so it's gonna be a huge influx of people and employers, and that's gonna change the game. Generally speaking, most of the time, cities and counties are like a upper to high. They're usually taking that higher range, you know, they're hardly ever taking the low. Even if, like, on this trend line here for Tenino, you know, if you draw it, you can kind of figure out what it would be. I didn't draw that too good, but you can figure out what it would be in 2020 and 2030 based on this, you know, straight line. But inevitably, I bet if you look at the growth rate, what you agreed to do, or agreed to grow, or expected to grow at in 2030 and 2040 was more like up here, right? Because everybody's always optimistic on that. Because the optimism allows you to do things like that,
Sure.
right? Because
You
you
could ask
say,
for more money.
hey, well, no, you can't ask for more money until you actually have the population, but that's, you know, because the way the state does revenue sharing or revenue adjustments is based on population, so big cities get more than little cities. But you don't get that until OFM estimates your population every April, or when the census comes around. But the reason for the high growth projection is because then you say, we are out of land, and we need to go get that land over there and have that part of us. And so that's like what happened with West Tenino. We said, hey, the city said there's not enough land to accommodate our 20-year build out, and so we need to add land to the urban growth area or into the city itself through annexation to accommodate our growth pattern. So I passed out the countywide planning policies because this is how the negotiation process works. When the state hands OFM hands a county a number, and let's just say 200. Let's say that's the number that the city, or that Thurston County accepts. They go through this preset and amended over time countywide planning policies to figure out how to allocate that. So you'll notice on this document that it was adopted initially in 1992, which is, you know, about a year to 2 years after GMA was founded, so they were right on top of everything, you know, getting there and writing up the policy language. And then it was amended in 2015. So what this will do is it says, this is kind of our framework for how we make decisions on when we allow cities to grow their UGA. So things like, and I'm on page 4 of that document under urban growth areas. Urban growth within Thurston County is to occur only in designated urban growth areas. So that begs the question, well, what's urban growth? Well, that comes back to that 4 unit. And there's some exceptions to that, but generally that's what it'll tell you. So then it tells you how to draw boundaries, how to do amendments, how to expand the UGA or the boundary itself. So South County jurisdictions, the expansion area can and will be served by municipal water and transportation in the succeeding 20 years. Must demonstrate the expansion can be served by sewage disposal measures that provide for effective treatment of wastewater in the succeeding 20 years, right? So they give you some standards for how that's supposed to happen. And then they give some other criteria too on the next page about, you know, insufficient land within the urban growth boundary to permit the urban growth that is forecast to occur in the succeeding 20 years. So that's why population's a big deal, and it drives a lot of this other stuff, is because population to the counties, to allocate to the cities, to push the urban growth boundary, to rezone and redesignate, to allow urban densities to occur, to then annex, and then to do it all over again. So it's supposed to happen in kind of a premeditated sense, so that it's not just sprawling all over the place. That's the intent.
Why is there a difference between the South County jurisdictions and the North?
Because I think the South County, the difference between those two sections is that the South County is just water and transportation without sewer.
Why
Right.
is that?
because I think that when this was done in '92, and I don't know what they amended in 2015, some of these, it's like Tenino didn't have a sewer
I
system.
see.
So if you didn't have that provision in there,
So
you
putting that
basically say
in there
you
would be
can't grow.
Enforcing that.
If it followed the North County jurisdiction that says the expansion can and will be served by a municipal sewer, well, we don't have a sewer.
I see,
So are you saying we can't grow, right? So that was that accommodation.
I see.
But you can plan to have a sewer system in 20 years, you know, and anyways, that's, your sewer system is what's gonna allow you to grow in a way that the last, whatever, 100 years has, you know, limited you. Anyway, so that's why I did that, as, you know, growth usually begets growth, you know, and it can be exponential, and, it's not gonna take a lot for Tenino to look like it's growing a lot, right? Because a 10% increase is only 170 people, right? A 10% increase for Lacey's 600 people, or 6,000 people, I mean, 6,000. So that's a lot of households. 6,000 households is like, I mean, 6,000 people is like, you know, I don't know, 3,000 houses. Maybe 2,000 houses. That's a lot of houses, you know, that's more than it's in the entire city. So it doesn't take a lot for you guys to look like you're, you know, busting at the seams. Questions on countywide planning policies and demographics and kind of population changes? While you're looking at that, Corey, we inadvertently covered designation of urban growth areas, kind of as we were talking. So, you know, we're kind of coming to the end of our stuff here, which is, you know, urban growth is in cities and rural growth is in the counties, and, you know, urban growth, is at the top of page 4, urban growth shall occur first in areas characterized by urban growth within existing public facilities, and second in areas characterized by urban growth that are not served, but that will be served. So what they're saying there is grow first in your city, then grow in your UGA, right? And once that stuff's filled up, then you're supposed to grow into, you know, you're supposed to propose new UGAs and start growing into that. So that hasn't always been the practice. I mean, that's kind of the cities and counties can't force people to develop. So if, you know, the owners of the Russell House wanna just sit there for the next 100 years, no one can force them to build, you know, an apartment complex just because they're zoned that way, right? And there's constitutional provisions or restrictions that say cities can't seize property for economic development. They can seize it for a road and build a road on it, but you can't take my property and then sell it to him so he can build a hotel. It's against the Constitution.
That's why a lot of times you'll see like those little pocket houses where
Surrounded by development.
totally, they just hold out, and so they build the office building around.
Yep.
What about annexing places that are, they're populated, they're developed, but at a coarser density than city densities would be?
So good question, but kind of complicated. I'll answer maybe the easiest part is that counties aren't just urban and rural anymore, or cities and non-cities. I didn't talk about counties because you're not a county, but you know, the portion of the county section of GMA talks about something called LAMIRDS. So LAMIRDS.
We
And
talked
that
about
stands
those with
for
Grand Mountain.
yeah, that sounds for a local area of more intense rural development. Island County, where I'm working, calls them RAIDs, which stands for Rural Areas of Intense Development, which I like better. I think RAIDs are way better acronym. But it's essentially those places like Grand Mountain or Rochester, not Yeah, Rochester, not, sort of, yeah, Rochester, because Rochester's not a city, where they are not a city, but there's like, everything else is there, they just never got their act together to turn themselves into a city. So the code says you can continue to kind of develop within a prescribed boundary that was drawn in 92 or whenever around this Lambert, and you can continue to infill that, but you can't go outside that boundary. So the GMA doesn't allow for expansion of a Lambert, which is highly problematic. So places like Onalaska or East Olympia up here, that maybe not a great example, but there are places in the state that are pretty populated. Packwood's a good example. Packwood's not a town.
No.
No, there's no city council, there's no mayor, they're non-incorporated, but it looks like a town.
Yeah.
Randall's not a town. So those are really stark examples in Lewis County of like, well, you know, what do we do with them? You know, how do they grow? Cause are you telling me that in a Packwood situation that I can't build a house on a you know, 8,000 square foot lot? Cause that's not
In the
rural,
town.
right? Or that if I go and I wanna subdivide my, you know, 1 acre lot into 6 lots, I can't do that because that's urban density, right? Cause that's six dwelling units per acre. So the state has said, no, there's these things called landmarks that are certain pockets that are a little more intense. So that wasn't exactly your question, but it's sort of related because it talks about little pockets of intensity and, you know, what do we do with those? And sometimes what cities have done is they've kind of gone like this and they grab them, right? And then now they've got this little spine that runs out to this, you know, more, this bigger pocket. So like, a good example is Napavine, which is a city. If you've ever been south of Centralia, Chehalis, and you're heading towards, you know, Portland, Napavine's kind of like up over on a hill, but there's a Love's truck stop, Starbucks, a couple other things kind of out of town on the right-hand side. That's all still part of the city of Napavine because Napavine went out and grabbed it and annexed it. So they put it in the UGA and then like the next day they annexed it. And because they were trying to grab that economic center, right,
Sure.
because it's an interchange, right? And that was before Edward Jones and Starbucks and all those guys came along. But that's how that a lot of times happens. If it's close to a city, it'll get grabbed.
And now they have utilities going out there, so it's easy to justify.
And then what they start doing is they backfill, right? They start backfilling back towards town. But that's not how GMA said you're supposed to do it. GMA says it's supposed to go like this, right?
Can you ever have an island? Does that make sense, like?
Yeah, it does, you're not supposed to.
Okay.
Like Olympia's got some unincorporated islands inside their town that is still county.
Okay.
That if you look at their map, you're like, where'd that come from? And it's just people who, like, that you can't force someone to annex.
And would it ever go the opposite way? Would there ever be a reason why a city would want to annex a small population but something not in between?
You can't do that.
No, it has to be
So
connected.
the only example I know of that is in Chewelah, and Chewelah has annexed an area that's like a mile and a half out of town. It's around a golf course, a bunch of houses around the golf course. So I don't exactly know how that happened. There are things called in county zoning called planned urban developments or like master plan communities.
Okay.
Like in Kittitas County, for example, Snoqualmie Pass and Suncadia are both master plan. They both have master plans on them, but they're a long ways away from any city. Suncadia's kind of up against Roslyn and Ronald, but.
Was Tenino, was the master plan when they originally did it?
Yeah, but there's no there's no density there, but,
What was it?
what would be a good example over here? I can't.
DuPont?
No, DuPont's a city, DuPont has, they're master planned, they're a master plan development, but I was thinking about an independent.
There's a little
you know.
piece of Lakewood that's like surrounded by McCord and Fort Lewis, and it's just trailers and like a logistics center, on the east side of the 5. It's like the only part of Lakewood that's over there.
Yeah, that's Springbrook,
and
that's
that's all-
incorporated.
Yeah, that is now.
But
that
there
was
is
because
a
there
part
was
in
a-
Lakewood called Arrowhead, which is over by Stillicum, which is not incorporated. So the problem with that, I guess we got the population forecast on the back there, I forgot about that. So that's what they're suggesting you guys are gonna get to in 24 is 3785. And I think you're real close to that 1760 right now in 2019. So, that's 2,000 people in the next 20 years. We gotta figure out where to put 2,000 people, which is, household sizes, like the last census was about 2.3 persons per household. I don't know what the next one's gonna be, but that's about average across the state. So just think of like a little bit less than 2.5 people per house, so that's about, 1,000 houses. Where are you gonna put 1,000 houses?
Has anyone ever run into the situation where, like Tenino has a limited amount of water? There are things that we could do to change that, obviously, but since we have to provide water, and if we get to this number, what happens if there is no more water based on to keep planning for growth?
Well, did I skip that? I think, no, that's on my 3 Cs. I'll come to that here in a second, but that's called concurrency. So the quick answer is you're supposed to say no more building. You're supposed to have like a building moratorium.
If you run out of the resources to support that development, okay.
Right. So let me answer the question on the island first, which is like, this is your city and this is a portion of unincorporated area that isn't part of your city. The reason that GMA says they don't like this is because the sheriff now has to drive all the way into there to respond to something, because technically, as the city police doesn't have to serve that, because these folks are paying taxes to the county, not to the city. So your money's going to pay for that sheriff's call. So the reality is the sheriff doesn't really respond, and the first responder arrangements that they have between each other means the city of Lakewood responds to that, which makes the city of Lakewood upset because they're not getting reimbursed for those calls. Same thing with
It's kind of like Mima Acre, right? I mean, it's not totally an island, but it's close at this point.
yeah, where is that?
That's
just on the way right out.
Oh, yeah, down here,
This
down
bit
here,
right
right.
here.
That's
But-
actually what I was looking at when I asked my
Oh,
question.
yeah.
Is
So
about,
if that was built out at a higher density, that would be a great example of that. The density it's at right now is probably, those are 5-acre parcels, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I
Right?
think so, yeah.
I mean, that's what the default county zoning is 5-acre parcels.
Okay.
Both Lewis County and Thurston County kind of have that as their default. So 1 house per 5 acres. So that density, how many houses is that right there? Maybe 30 houses, right? If you put that in the city and subdivide it, it's like, 300 or 400 houses in that same area. So that's the difference in service level. The county sheriffs have to respond across the county, but there's not a whole lot of people and they're all spread out, versus the city guys, the police officers are just driving this, 30 block radius, but they get a lot of calls because there's a lot of concentration.
Sure.
but did you said you can't annex into a city a property where the property owner doesn't want to be?
Right. So the annexation process is based on what's called a petition method, and it's on assessed value, not just So if I have a 20-acre parcel that's worth 20 grand, and you have an approved home that's worth 100, you get 5 votes and I get 1, right? Because it's assessed value. But a lot of times when developments are built or when the UGA is established, that cities would have figured out that we don't want a bunch of rural development right up against us, because then that limits our ability to grow the urban densities. So they'll do something called a no protest. So that the owner would sign a no protest that says, when you're ready to annex me, I'm not gonna protest that annexation.
What's the
And I
benefit
think-
of signing
What the benefit is that you get to go in the UGA and be whatever density you have as a UGA density, and not necessarily
it?
as
Sure,
a.
I understand, like, there would be a financial benefit, but if somebody didn't want to be annexed, because they're.
We're dealing with that on Minor Mountain, right?
So that would
They don't
be-
wanna-
Yeah, these people have traditionally not wanted to be annexed by the city, in Mima Acres. So if some of them wanted to, but, half didn't, is that
it goes to a vote.
It's a vote of the whole area that's being considered, so you can sort of gerrymander your.
It has happened like
Reduced
that,
your
but
area
now,
around
so
it.
now you're seeing the value of the countywide planning policies. The countywide planning policies, you come back here and you look at, expansion of the UGA or whatever, and they'll talk about irregular boundaries, you know, and so,
Okay.
I don't know, I could probably find it in here, but promotion of contiguous and orderly development, provision of urban services, and protection of rural lands, and I bet it says something in here about irregular boundaries. There is also a Thurston County Boundary Review Board who looks at all annexations and approves them before they're final, and those folks would say, come on. Right, you know, you've taken a lot by lot basis and you can't do that. So they would find that, they could find that invalid.
I see.
So to kind of bring us home here on the 3 C's of planning, the 3 C's are comprehensive, consistency, and concurrency. Comprehensive just means, you know, a full and complete planning process that looks at a bunch of different things that affect an area, that you're not just looking through a telescope or something, you're kind of considering all of it, and it covers all the bases. Consistency means that the plan and the policy documents say the same things. They're not at odds with each other. One doesn't say red and the other say blue, they both are saying the same thing. And that the development implements, you know, the regulations implement the policies. So when you do your update, you send off a little checklist to Commerce, and the Commerce is asking you, show us where in your zoning code, your development regulations, you're implementing that section of the policy that you just called out, that we require. So grab a policy in there and you probably figure out where it's attached to in the development regulations. And concurrency is the one that you raised, which is probably the hardest one to do, and it's also the one that cities and counties play fastest and loosest with, because the downside so rough is that a community must be able to demonstrate its ability to finance the capital facilities it needs to meet a planned use. If they don't have that ability, it has to re-examine its land use assumptions. So if the city doesn't have enough water to serve a build out of a parcel that's in the UGA, it may need to pull that parcel out of the UGA. Or not allow it to develop at urban densities until the water is identified. That's the other limitation. So it's not an actual, that's usually what happens, is they just say, we thought we had it, we don't have it because it got absorbed by something else. And we're just gonna leave it there, and when we have water or when we have sewer capacity, that's when we'll allow that thing to develop. Or if the owner brings us a solution, like Barnett could say, I'm gonna do my own treatment plant, or I'll do my own wells, and I'll provide my own water, and I'll tap into the city system, and so now we resolve that issue and we're good to go. But not only do you have to have that, but then that last paragraph, you have to have that improvement or strategy in place at the time of development, or a commitment from the developer to provide those within 6 years. So that's concurrency, and that's the hard one, and that's the one that comes back to that level of service thing that we talked about, where, hey, the road's failing, and they say, look, I'll pay you, in 5-year installments, and then by the 6th year you can build the signal or whatever. Or I'm gonna ramp up my business, I'm not gonna be that busy, but even though full build out of my strip mall is gonna happen, 5 years out, and so I'll pay a fee, and you can cobble together other fees and then upgrade the road.
I think the Hidden Meadows development, they had something like that with the road frontage improvements. Is
So
that
what-
the same thing? Or?
Sort of what Hidden Meadows did is paid a fee in lieu of
Oh, I see.
improvement, and that means, look, we don't need a 6-foot sidewalk out there for 800 feet, that doesn't connect to anything. So city, we'd rather just give you the money what it cost us to build that, and you hold on to it until such time as you can build the connection from our property all the way to, existing sidewalks. And so what the cities do is they put that money aside, they have to kind of designate it so they don't spend it on something else. And then when the next development and the next development in that area comes along, because there's a couple, right? You've got this one, you've got that, you've got that, you've got that, you've got stuff across the street. This is the, Dodge property, that we have a stop work on. I presented to you guys on that. That right there is Scatter Creek, right? So that little yellow, the, yellow wavy line property. Where is it? Yeah, it's right here. So and that's across the street from the Hidden Meadows. When that and that come in together, and then maybe this parcel comes in as well, then now you've got enough to, maybe you got sidewalks on one side of the street. Or maybe the county comes along and says, we're gonna build the Tenino connection, right, like that presentation you saw. So they take that money and they add it as a match to that grant funds, and now they got themselves a, pathway.
And what does the ES mean after single family?
Environmentally sensitive, so that's like the most restrictive zone in the city. From a,
It's where Scatter Creek is.
yeah, that's where Scatter Creek, and there's a bunch of floodplain in there too, and slopes and other fun stuff. So, that's concurrency. I leave you with this kind of, fun little bit dated, but still relevant, population increase, looking at like an extra 833,000 people by 2025, and that was in 2015, so, that's 10 years worth of growth. I know we're pushing, well over 7 million. I'm not sure how close we're tracking with that, but, you can see that the growth in the counties has shrunk over time from 50% of the state's balance to 35%. That's consistent across the country. Everywhere is getting more urban. That's what you'd expect as something grows. The problem is, and this is a kind of a fun aside, counties. So you can see how GMA is set up here, right? All the heavy duty stuff has to happen in cities, and cities can expand to pick up new land if they need to grow. Well, how are counties supposed to grow? Counties can't go grab other counties' land.
Increase density.
They can increase density to a certain limit, right? What's the limit?
4 to an acre.
No more than 4 an acre, right? So
So the minute they go above that, they're kind of,
they can't really go above that. They're not really supposed to approve going above that at all.
because that would almost mean that they're no longer the county, they should be reverting to urban.
Yeah, so if the county is approving development that has a net acreage, has a net gain of more than 4 units an acre, they'll probably, someone out there will say that's illegal, and they'll challenge them through the Land Use Petition Act to the Growth Management Hearing Board. The Growth Management Hearing Board will say that's 200 units on 4 acres, that's too much, that violates GMA, that's not rural, and so then they'll invalidate the whole plan.
So here's just a question, Frog Hollow. Now, so are there certain situations where a developer can take 100 acres and say X amount will be preserved,
Yeah.
and then we'll put, okay,
That's called cluster zoning. So you basically take all that density and you squeeze it down to one area, and then that other part's set aside.
then it'll be permanently, okay,
It's like a conservation easement.
Totally.
There's a title limits, restrictions and stuff like that. And that's cool, that counties, what happens there though is now you've got all these people living in tighter quarters.
with septic tanks.
With septic tanks,
Right,
exactly. So
right.
now what happens in that regard, so in most cases where you have a large cluster development like that, you'll see like a package plant or some type of miniature wastewater treatment plant just for that development.
Okay.
When they'll all flush it, goes to the same spot, and it maybe infiltrates somewhere else out there in the conservation easement, but they're all connected to that because you don't have enough land. That's what the 5 acre parcels are for. That's for infiltration for septics. That's why it's so big.
So the benefit of being annexed is, number one, you get access to all of the public utilities. Number two, if you're a developer, now all of a sudden, instead of being able to build, a house for 5 acres, now you can significantly increase. Okay.
You might be able to build 20 houses per acre.
Sure.
Most cities, their single family zoning is
6 units an acre. That's kind of a comfort level for most cities. Other cities have pushed that, so 6,000, so there's 43,560 square feet in an acre, 43,560. So half acre parcels are like 21,000 square foot. Quarter acre parcels are about 10,000 square foot. So most new homes are being built on 6,000 square foot lots.
Right.
So 6,000 to 7,000 square foot is pretty common. That's like, what is it, like 40 by, I don't know, 120, something like that. That would be 480. So, 50 by 120, that's 6,000. 50 feet wide. So then when you do your setbacks, because you can't be up against your property line, you gotta have fire setbacks. So you usually have 5 foot fire setbacks. So then now you gotta, what would that be, a 30-foot house, a 30-foot wide house, goes back. That's why your development pattern starts to look the way it does, where a lot of things start looking the same. Because they're trying to fit a bunch of density onto that lot. Because a lot of the cost in Washington State for homes is in the lot because of these boundaries that we've set up. This says you can't do a big old subdivision out here, right? You have to do it in the colored area in here. Where's Frog Hollow?
That's,
99 that way.
Okay.
yeah, out towards, we have a friend who lives up on the hill behind, and he was telling me about it, that the developer he's got,
Is that Hanson? Todd Hanson?
Yeah.
oh, the developer? Well, okay, yeah, he was just saying, they bought a place that's on 30 acres, but somehow it's tied into Frog Hollow, where that's the only house that's allowed to be.
It was like the original house or something?
Yeah, or the subdivided parcel that's just one residential structure for 30 acres. There's no way you can ever subdivide it in any way. Which is great for him, because he got it for,
Those
nice
have big,
deal, but-
those have big impacts on water resources too, because they don't, a lot of times, you get like 6-pack wells, I think they call them a lot of times, but like, they're not regulated in terms of, water resources the same way that the city's water is. They don't really keep track of how much water they're taking.
Oh, sure.
In the same way, and so, it has a lot of implications for like in-stream flows for fish and that sort of thing when it gets close, like in our watershed, and which is part of the Chehalis Basin. We're always having in-stream flow issues, and so a lot of the unregulated take from groundwater has a big impact on that. That's hard for the state to figure out how to fix those problems
When they're not
when
keeping
they're not
numbers.
keeping track the same way that cities
Sure.
are.
Well, groundwater is like incredibly hard. It's not like you can just go down there and, drop a dye in the ground and figure out where it pops out on the other side. It's hard to figure out what the groundwater levels are. And it's super hydrogeomorphologists.
I mean, there are wells, monitoring wells all over
Yeah.
the place.
It's hard to figure out where overall it's coming from. Aquifers.
Right.
There is aquifer, there's, part of the environmental stuff we can talk about next month is aquifer recharge areas. So that's part of the comp plan policies in the natural resources section. So land use is usually the biggest chapter in the comp plan. It's covers a lot of ground. It does all that population stuff.
How much of the shrinking of the counties is related to cities getting bigger, as opposed to just like population decreasing? People aren't moving out of the county, probably.
Oh, I think that's right. I don't think it is because, I think the county population, if you look at it, it stayed at about 2.3 million. It stayed the same, but the reason the percentage has gone down is because the state's grown. But all the growth, most of the growth is happening in the cities. That's what that's showing, is the counties are staying about the same overall as far as net
But they're
population.
losing-
But they're losing population
ground.
share and ground, physical ground to the cities. Part of that growth is in
Part of that growth is because the cities are getting more dense, you know, and part of that growth is because they're growing into county areas that nobody lives in, so that population number's not coming down, but then all future growth goes to the city. So what I was gonna say, I lost my train of thought, but I was gonna say is the counties are really like on borrowed time, like I call them zombies. Cause there's really no way for them to be financially stable under GMA. They're losing ground to cities, they're losing population, and they can't make any money off of, you know, commercial or retail, because all that stuff at a certain density is supposed to be in a city. And if you do it at a dense enough, you have to have water and sewer in order to make that work. So you couldn't go put a big box Home Depot out in the middle of the county probably, because it needs.
Except maybe in Grand Mound.
Yeah, I mean, so in a Lammert you could,
So
you
there's
know.
so it's like a game that they're kind of playing where they can make money on the lanyard or is that what you call it, lanyard? And for up to a certain point until they can't justify it not being a city anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so they, you know, cost of providing services goes up, right? This, almost the same as cities, so the cost for a sheriff or a police officer is about the same, you know, but the sheriff has to go from, what's Cooper Point all the way out to, what's that lake southeast of Yelm?
Lake Lawrence?
Yeah,
Lawrence.